Let's go back to affordability. So when you look at the economics of building something, you just can't build it for cheaper. It just is what it is.
Right.
And so the only way to deliver a new unit that is more affordable, you have two options. One, you go get government money, some type of tax subsidy.
Yep.
You bang your head against the wall to figure it out, and then now you're forced to then manage it every year at this level of affordability. Yep. Or you build a different housing style.
Right.
You build it smaller. So like our cost per square, we sell these, like 500 grand for 800 square feet. So $600 a square feet. Really expensive.
Right.
But it's 500 grand for new construction with a yard and no common law.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it's a different unit type. So the gross cost to the end user makes sense on a month-to-month basis.
And it's like a detached condo situation?
Correct. Yeah. So we're doing either condos or middle housing land division. But
Hey guys, welcome to the Realized Gains podcast. I'm Stephen Tran.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee, and we're super excited to have Mike Nuss on the podcast today. He's with Rarebird, and then he also has his own podcast, Deal Junkies. And do you have a name for your development group as well, or?
No.
Or does it fall under the
Yeah,
same?
so everything's Rarebird acquisitions,
Okay.
property management, real estate, and then Investor Lab for the education.
Oh yeah, Investor Lab, of course, well known in the community for Investor Lab. Mike, you want to just give us really quick your background?
I love realized gains.
Yes, that's all you need to say.
You have more unrealized gains than realized gains.
Dude, why? Unrealized gains hold America back. And that is my whole belief
right?
on them. Yeah, because if your whole process is I need to avoid tax, but you don't have enough income yet to avoid tax, you're playing the wrong game. Right? So you have to understand what game that you're playing. So background, is that what the question is?
Where are you from? You know, things like
Grew up
that.
in Salem, Oregon for 18
Great
years.
place.
It's a great place. Love Salem. It's top 10 safest city in
That's
America.
right.
Unless you grew up in Salem and your baseline is a lot safer than Salem is now. And then I moved to Portland right out of high school, got into real estate appraisal, started an appraisal business in 2004, transitioned out of that into development in 2009, 2010.
Right, when everyone got out of appraisal, right?
Yes. That was the great window opening for me of saying, look, you don't want this, you've never really wanted it, great income, good career, but I'm not a career-driven human being. Filed bankruptcy in 2011. I learned a lot about partnerships between 2010 and 2011 and ended up in bankruptcy. So the Great Recession did not send me under, but a bad partnership afterward did. And then I met my business partner in 2010. We started 2011. Started building my portfolio in 2012. And that's when it was now, instead of being an appraiser with some investing knowledge, I was a acquisition and development and understood a lot of tools. Still, trying to break out of bankruptcy, so it was a lot of seller financing and creative stuff.
So you learned it more out of necessity than out of
that, and I just am I consume information. I'm a consumer, data mining. So Jeff Hoffman, who started Priceline, has a great YouTube video about data mining and just kind of how our brain and our psychology works. So yeah, and then you start getting some duration and build up a portfolio. Went to sell a triplex in 2014, realized property management sucked. So we decided to start property management. And we went from 11 units to 23, and that was kind of the time, well, now it makes sense. Not enough to hire staff, but enough to, okay, we can take this on. There's a little bit more income to then put energy into creating a software stack and SOPs. And, I was a leasing agent and assistant property manager and property manager and all those things.
When you say property management sucked, you're saying that you had a
services, management companies. It's one of the hardest voids to fill.
Right.
Especially now, inflation really messed property management up from the get-go. But no one's tied to your bottom line. At the end of the day,
I have a really hard time getting basic statements from my property manager.
It's insane. Well, in the way because property managers are driven by their laws, and those are typically driven by your trust account laws. And so the reports I give you are mid-month to mid-month because that's when we run our statements.
Right.
And so you need other documents to justify your owner statement. Most people aren't there's another 12-month income statement.
Right.
So,
Which
but
is
it's
the bank ones, yeah.
yeah, and I was actually thinking about this. Our entire economy is designed to keep the owner away from the user, right? So like on a property manager, so you're detached from the end
liability.
user,
You
detached
don't
from
want
the
the
system.
liability.
Correct. Yeah, it's all based on lawsuits and insurance.
Yeah.
And so there's a separation of the controller and the controlled, for lack of better terms. And that person in the middle becomes more and more expensive as our cost of living goes up. So you just don't get good services because they don't think like an owner. And so that was the driving mission of our property management company, which was, management by owners for owners. Built a management company, realized I didn't want to do that. Because now you're someone else's employee essentially through a contract. And then your staff are managing other people's problems instead of your problem.
Yeah.
So sold the client portfolio off so we could put resources back into what we do best. Yeah.
I've heard about people building property management portfolios as part of their brokerage because it's an asset that's easy to like appraise and sell. Did you find that to be the case when you sold your
Like the management company?
yeah, like just because it's an entity that you can easily look at and be like, okay, it's worth this much because it manages this amount.
It's recurring revenue. So those contracts are worth more because they're less relational and they're more contractual, I guess.
Versus trying to sell a real estate brokerage that just does sales.
Yeah, and then there's so many more real estate agents and property managers, and so if you are a good property manager and you buy a contract, the retention rate's going to be a lot higher. I assume, I don't know. We just sold it to someone else in the marketplace, and quite frankly, that's a lot of those clients just begged us to come back.
Oh, enjoy the management who took over?
Correct. Yeah. A lot of them, and that's the worst part is when you build like those contracts are really relationships documented on paper, right? And so now hey, we don't want to do this, but we have to. And so we have to restructure, and then they don't like who you sell to.
Yeah.
And then you have a non-compete, right? And so that has to work out. But yeah, the service industry just doesn't typically value their clients. They value transactions more than what's their audience. And a lot of them don't even really know what their audience is.
Interesting. Okay, so you went on for property management. What was next then?
So I had a business partner at the time. He was a licensed broker. And so, it was the brokerage and the property management. I got the property management license. He had the brokerage. And we were always doing education. So when I transitioned out of appraisal into investments, I bought a Rich Dad Poor Dad education package, paid $26,000. It wasn't a waste, but it wasn't worth it. Some dude from Idaho who was the mentor who didn't teach me anything was like, before I come out from Idaho and visit you in Portland, you have to go join a meetup. And so I went to a meetup and met people. And so that was impactful for me because I realized that $26,000 wasn't worth it when I could have done $100 to go to these meetings.
Well, can you clarify what kind of meetings these were? Just regular investor
This
meetings?
was the RIA. So in 2010, there was no meetup. Meetup.com wasn't around, and small events weren't a thing. And so the only real association out there was the National RIA, right? The Real Estate Investment Association, which
REIA?
REIA, right? Yeah. So it's a dinosaur model. So they are not Rich Dad Poor Dad selling you overpriced education from people that don't actually know how to teach. They are the people brokering people to sell you the overpriced education.
Right.
So
people would go there to pitch their packages,
But when I joined in 2010, it was a good community. Most of the sharks of the investing world were gone because you can't, if no one's doing anything, you can't eat the population.
Right.
So the sharks are gone. So it's good people. But we started meeting in 2012 in the basement of Eastburn Pub for anyone in Portland. There's skee ball in the background and it's really dark and giving an economic presentation, and quickly grew that to something large. And then we branded it. When we branded our company Rarebird, then we just branded the education side. It was Rarebird Investor Network initially, and then we rebranded that to Investor Lab. So, and it's kind of like knowing your audience.
That's how I think I first heard about you, like way back before we met or when one of your events. I heard about your events through Rarebird. I was talking about some investor and they're like, "Oh, you should go to one of these events with Rarebird." Yeah. So you guys have been doing that since 2016. You said?
2012.
Oh, 2012.
Wow.
Yeah. Under the RIA. So we were under the RIA until 2014.
Okay.
And then we changed it from Rarebird Investor Network to Investor Lab right in COVID.
Okay.
So we launched a new venue, like literally March 12th was our event. March 14th was when the state shut down. And so that was our first event at the new venue under the new name.
God.
Oh, that's the one over the bar. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah, at the Evergreen.
Nice. And what, like, were you all, because every time I've been to one of those events, you usually give like an economic update. Have you always been speaking at those, or did that come over time, or how did you get your speaking chops, so to speak?
Yeah, actually, I started as appraisal. So I did a lot of CE classes. So I've built every single business through education. It's just education-based sales, if you want to say that, but it's
But not selling a passive packet.
not selling shit. It's amazing when you go on stage and just give everything that you know that people actually call you and want to do business with you.
Right.
So I learned that early on in 2004. So when I started my appraisal company, I had a great CPA, a good attorney, and some brokers that I knew that introduced me to mortgage brokers. And then everyone loves
Back when we could still talk to you.
You can still talk to everybody. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. I essentially quit on day one, and then within 2 months, I was, $20,000 a month of revenue. So it was a great way to start a business, but a lot of that was just driven through doing CE classes for brokerages. And so now you're doing CE classes, you get your name out there. The investment side didn't really. It started as just like, hey, let's do a deal analysis meeting, because there wasn't really a deal meeting. It was there was, but it wasn't a very good meeting. Whereas we're kind of some of the busier people that showed up on a regular basis, and so people knew us as the volume people. So it's like, well, we always have deals. We can do some deals and analyze them quickly. That got into economics, and so I think it was like 2014. I gave my first economic forecast.
Okay.
And then people started asking for that.
And you just learned macroeconomics from following the economy, or did you?
Yeah,
this $26,000 course you spent, did that teach you macro?
It's so funny. My high school year, I got a D in economics, and senior year, and the only reason I got
high
a D
school
is
economics was like the worst.
my football coach was a teacher.
There
It was
you go.
the worst. It was like, he's trying to tell us why you don't get insurance if your car is not, you're like only liability if your car value is low, and then demand actually drives value, and I couldn't understand that. I was like, no, like you got to build it before it sells. It's just everything was backwards. And so when I got my appraisal license, because the industry was so easy, I just got the entry-level license. I never upgraded. And then when Dodd-Frank passed after the Great Recession, no one would hire you if you didn't have a higher license. And so and then Oregon changed it, so you had to have a college degree, and I didn't have a college degree.
And like 2 years under another appraiser.
Yeah,
too,
well, that's
right?
always been there.
Okay.
So that
was
apprentice,
the additional step. Okay.
So they increased the amount of hours, but really it was that college degree. And I didn't have one, but I had almost all the classes, and so you could do it with an in lieu.
Right.
I needed an economics class, so I took an economics class at Portland Community College.
Nice.
And the dude was awesome.
Really?
It was 2009, so he was actually saying we're not in a recession anymore. It was really weird to be in the middle of a recession, because the data is different, right?
Yeah, it's always lagging.
In reverse.
Always lagging, yep.
Yeah. And so when he's pointing to things, he's like, the contraction's happened, right? Now we can actually point to expansion.
Yeah.
Understanding how long that would take and how it actually plays out. But there's actually data really early on to show that the contraction was done. And maybe this was in 2010 and not 2009, but that changed how I saw economics. And then now I'm as an actual investor. So being an appraiser is a weatherman. You don't actually know anything. You're a hall monitor. It's a lot of ego. You don't actually know how to value anything. When you put your own money on the line, you actually learn. Right. You know what it takes to rent something, to sell something, to buy something. And so the economics change when your mind is in it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I feel like as an appraiser, you have to be very analytical. Like you have to they always want to justify everything with numbers, right?
Which is impossible.
And I feel like when you talk speaking about investing, you're looking at qualitative more so. So like what was there a shift when you started buying your own stuff, or like?
No, I always thought it was a joke because because it's not true, right? Like I can always see the difference between reality and paper. And so when you're in classes, you have to teach in vacuums, right? And so your paired sales analysis is the best. It's an appraisal term. So when they make an adjustment on that grid, you've got a 3-car garage, but everyone else has a 2. How much is that 3rd car garage worth? Add 10 grand.
Yep.
There's an actual approach to isolate that value. It's impossible to do.
Right.
How do you isolate if they're within if it's cookie cutter
Right.
and they're within 2 years of each other and
Right.
close square footage,
Yeah.
okay, sure, you can isolate that component. But if you're in a neighborhood where homes are built from 1895 to 2020,
Oh, yeah.
how do you extract that? It's
Right.
impossible to extract that. And so if that's your fundamental understanding, it's like this table is real, right? So
Right.
if your fundamental understanding is this table is solid, that shapes everything. Well, physics tells us it's not solid, but we believe it's solid, so that shapes everything.
Right.
So if I believe the appraisal industry is a joke, then I can see it for what it is.
Mhm.
But if I believe that you can actually extract something to that's worth 305, not 300,
Yep.
or that garage is 10 grand and not 7, that's not real.
Right.
And so now I can truly assess what the industry is based on knowing that assumptions are just assumptions. They're just guesses. And so now instead of trying to isolate everything, you say, well, what's the trend, right? And so what I say is the best I can do is come within 10% of value. So that's a 20% swing.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
now,
It's huge.
yeah, so now I'm thinking like an investor, which is right. There's my range, right? There's my range of probability of where I'm going to execute. So I got my low end and my high end, but that just comes down to being a decent appraiser. And if you think about investing, why do you come up with an IRR or an A? It's all based on projections, which are just assumptions to come up with numbers to help you make a decision to allocate capital. And so the psychology behind it, how is that psychology driven? And so as an appraiser, you just can't ignore that most of the things that are talked about are fake and not real. And they're just emotions.
And I think that's why, at least as the lender, I'm always this stuck in the middle. If there's a low appraisal, right, where the realtor's like, no, I know it's worth more. And I'm always like, well, prove it. Like, the appraiser needs proof. I can't just say, like, we think it's worth more. And I think there's that disconnect because I think a realtor is typically thinking more on that side versus where the appraiser's like, it's.
Well, they're also just self-interested too. Like, I don't want this deal to fall apart.
That's true, of course.
They're gonna say, of course it's worth this much. These comps that obviously make my case look good are awesome.
Well, and then you get in the, you mentioned I was in the arena where you could talk to brokers, realtors, everything, and
Right.
there's a period of time where there is just no data to support anything.
And if the market's moving, right, then that's a whole different thing.
Own self-best interest, right, and knowing your audience and putting yourself in your shoes. But if you're an appraiser and they have 10 offers and there's no comps to support it, what is that actually saying, right? And so how do you then quantify that?
Yeah.
Or how do you qualitatively use data to tell the picture?
When there's lacking sales. Yeah.
And then, I've been, as an appraiser, you get into conversations where people's reputations are on the line, and then you see how people react. Like, one of the bigger realtors in town, I have no respect for him because he sold a property to someone in like 2006 and they wanted to refi in 2008. And, the broker's like, hey, are there any comps to support this value? Because they're comp check,
Right.
that would happen. Like, dude, absolutely not. You're not even within 10 or 15% of that. They want their value to go up and we're in the middle of a crash.
Yeah.
Well, the broker who sold the house called me. I don't know the broker.
Yeah.
What are you doing calling? You shouldn't even be part of this conversation because they're talking about a refinance, and hammered me. You can't do this. And I'm like, yeah, you feel bad. You sold them for a house for too much and they're in a bad financial position. So why are you yelling at me? Right. And so now, and this is just a whole different color on the industry in of itself, but it is driven by its own best self-interest, and our own best self-interests are driven by our ego.
Right.
And so the longer you get into it, you see, well, who do you want to do business? Yeah, we can talk on other philosophical stuff, but
Great point. So let's go back. Investment journey. You obviously have a super diverse portfolio, and you've kind of like done all the different things. You had your property management business, then you talked more about just investing in property in general. How did you get rolling on that?
Rich Dad Poor Dad was great. Like, I hate Robert Kiyosaki's education now because it's just fear-based gold selling. But
he went from building a business to selling gold and crypto. Right?
He's kind of a crazy person though.
He's crazy. Yeah, he's literally, and if you see him on stage, he's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what happens with age, and then lack of control, right? But he's still the face, and you still have to put him on stage, even if you don't know what he's going to say. It's kind of like our president.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to, the older you get, the more you want to hold on to what you have, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly it. So it's a fear-based protectionist mindset. Well, that's not investing advice, right? I don't think protectionist mindset is investing. It's saving, right? So, but anyway, so Rich Dad Poor Dad was great. It really was the cash flow quadrant, and then understanding the different ways of income can come in. I bought my first house in 03, started my business in 04. And so quickly, when you start printing money every month, like 20 grand a month of appraisal fees, quickly you don't want to go buy real estate.
Right.
Like, okay, let's run a business.
Yep.
But I wasn't.
You realized putting money into your real estate was nothing compared to putting money into your business.
Yeah. But I also wasn't qualified. I didn't know how to hire and fire. I didn't know how to train.
You weren't qualified because you needed, 2 years of tax?
No, just a human being.
Oh.
Like to run a piano, run a business.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Talk about buying property. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because I didn't understand, like, I had some accounting classes, but hiring and firing, why do you hire someone? Why do you fire someone? Why do they want to work for you? How do you motivate someone?
Yeah.
So I wasn't effective at what I did, which was fine, you know. So learning, what I realized on the business side though is at that period of time, I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't qualified. I think really what it was is I didn't understand the psychology behind it. And so I was working in the business was part of it, and I didn't want to be in basements. And what I loved about it was being in people's living rooms, talking to them about economics, right? And finances. Because that's really what the fun of it was. Talking to brokers about value, mortgage brokers about value, homeowners about making these types of investments and doing this and that.
Right.
And so that's what in the investing world brought. And when I realized what that world had, quickly I realized, well, I want to create a business in that world and not in this world.
I see.
But I did that through acquisitions. Like, that was my mindset was, well, I need to make money, and you can't make money if you don't buy anything. So then acquisitions drove everything. And so someone actually told me the other day, they thought I was a real estate agent. Don't ever think that. So
well, you own a brokerage.
I own a brokerage, but we're acquisitions and asset management drive everything we do, right? So like Gabe at SMI, on the Deal Junkies, it's more, I mean, management does, but it's brokerage drives a lot of what they do. Whereas for us, management drives what we do, and acquisitions really drives what we do.
And value add.
Yeah, because that's what I like, right? I don't like disposition. I hate disposition. Why? Because someone else has to make a decision, and I may not make this. And I typically, if you're buying it from me, I'm making profit. I don't like your decision.
Yeah.
So why do I want to convince people to make a decision that I don't personally like? Same reason I hate subject to is just I would never do a subject to, so why would I try and convince someone that that's the smart thing for me? I'll pitch it when it does make sense, right? But so a lot of what I do is driven by my own psychology of, well, this is just who I want to be.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about disposition and subject to for our audience that might be kind of new to those terms.
Yeah, so disposition is an exit. So everything that you do has some type of exit,
right?
Whether it's the remodel's done and now you have a tenant in it and it's being managed by a manager, but there's some exit. Like each acquisition in a vacuum has a business model. It is a business. It's not just buying an asset. Whoever, thank you, Rich Dad Poor Dad, for telling people buying real estate is just buying an asset, because you're not. You're starting a business.
Yeah.
And so it's knowing the beginning and the end. I would much rather have the disposition being handing off to a property manager or the disposition being handed off to a listing agent.
Right.
So that way I'm not involved in that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's when you say you don't like the disposition part, you don't like that offloading part.
Correct. But I love acquisitions and I love negotiating stuff and I love the underwriting aspect and I love to create a plan of how we're going to create value and I love to talk about the finance model behind it. So I love the asset management and the acquisition, and then you outsource everything else. But if you want an ecosystem, you can't outsource everything.
Right.
So it's who are the people, and ultimately what happened, we hired, so EOS, Traction, great book, Rocket Fuel, an even better book, the relationship between a visionary and an integrator. And after reading those two books, hired an actual EOS coach. And he was actually...
What's EOS again?
EOS is an entrepreneurial operating system. So it's a system of how to run your
I
business.
think Brandon Turner was talking about that on Bigger
Yeah,
Pockets.
Gino Wickman's the author. He was a realtor, so he's like a Keller Williams guy. So but before Keller Williams. So he created this system, operating system. A lot of really successful entrepreneurs use it. It's a really good system.
So this is a good recommendation for folks that might be good at bringing in business but have trouble, like doing accounting, running their business, or.
No, I would actually say it's more about your HR. It's more about your org chart and how do you keep everyone, right people, right seat, moving in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's more about that. And that was the value add, is we hired an EOS coach, implementer coach, who actually worked at Tektronix and Intel.
Mm-hmm.
So his specialty was, I've hired and fired over 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we needed to grow, we needed to learn how to hire and fire. And up and prior to that, we did our rebranding in 2014. We had really, really strong core values, just a good reputation. Now, if you get really good coaching on the psychology behind people, and so that's actually when I started getting into just psychology in and of itself. And then learn, like our first hire was a good hire. Our second hire was the right person, wrong seat. And then you learn about trying to force the right person into the wrong seat and how that messes up. So once you then get that, now you can create an ecosystem, because you can put the right people in the right seat on the bus and get the bus moving in the right direction. But first, you have to get the bus going, which typically means you're on a lot of seats and you have wrong people in wrong seats or right people in wrong seats. But there's a certain point where you can figure out your HR, your org chart. People can all be working together. They can be aligned on your vision. So that's part of EOS, is the right vision, and then you're driving in the right direction.
Got it.
Yeah.
Using this system, can you kind of talk about how large you've been able to scale to in terms of your business, all your other,
Yeah, I think systems are bullshit.
Oh, you call it EOS system, right?
It's just a system. So any business can operate off of a system. Every business needs some type of a system, but that system is going to work based off the culture of the company, right?
Yeah.
And the culture is typically driven by the leader. And so if you're not a relational type leader, I don't know that that's the right system. You might need something that is more numbers driven and data driven. So I think actually scaling is about two things. One, it's about your org chart and cash flow projections. So how many people actually know what a P&L is versus a balance sheet?
Yeah.
And especially in real estate. So like, I just saw this question today, and if someone hears this, I'm not using you and picking on you. I used to think this, but it's like, I got a loan for this, and they say, well, there's a difference between a balance sheet. Principal balance shows up on your balance sheet of a loan.
Yep.
The interest cost to your loan shows up on your P&L,
Yep.
right? And so how do you separate those things and understand?
Because cash flow includes both, right?
Exactly,
And
cash flow is the other piece.
Nobody understands the principal portion of that is different, right?
Yep. So you have your P&L. You have your P&L, which is different than your cash flow.
Yeah.
You have your balance sheet that doesn't show equity,
Right.
which is different than your real estate schedule. So you have those three different things, but what is on none of those is your cash flow, right? And when you're in real estate, guess what?
That's what
You take huge
that's what you
swings.
talk about. Yeah.
Huge swings in cash flow, and it's liquidity is really the conversation, right? And so I'd love for people to. This is what I've been dwelling on is there's the difference between having liquidity and being liquid, or feeling liquid. Meaning, I've been month to month in my personal P&L forever. That's just how I run. Most people say we put our money back into the business. Really what they're doing is saying they're not paying themselves. So that's the route I've chosen, is just not to pay ourselves, so it stays in the business.
Yeah.
And so the business has a lot of liquidity, but I don't feel liquid.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you don't feel like you can just spend as much money as you want on anything.
Because I can't.
Right.
Right. And that's my job as the visionary and the owner of the company, is not run out of money. Right. And so why do developers go under?
They run out of money.
They run out of money.
Yeah.
But it starts with getting over your skis one at a time. And you get over your skis by not understanding your absorption rate on the back end, right? So the disposition side. When can you refinance? When can you sell? Does a sale fail happen? When in 2021 and 22, our sale fail rate was like less than 2%.
Yeah.
Right now, if your sale fail rate's 40%, you're doing good.
It's crazy to think how quick that flips, and how
Yeah.
short-term our memories are.
Yeah. So if you're not paying attention to cash flow projections, your P&L can look fine and you can run out of money. Your balance sheet can look good and you can run out of money. Your real estate schedule can be great and you can run out of money. And so I think scaling just requires you have a good pulse on when money's coming and going.
Yeah, well, let's go back to 2021, 2022, COVID.
Mhm.
Everybody's buying. not knowing, the future of interest rates and everything, like, were you prepared for that?
Prepared, yeah. Being prepared is different than taking advantage of.
Okay.
And again, your business models don't always align with market conditions. So we had built our portfolio mostly from 2012 to 2017. We moved into our office in 2017. So bought our office building in 2015, renovated in 16, moved in 17.
Oh, nice. You own the building.
Yeah.
Single tenant or?
Yeah, it's we bought 2 properties next to each other, a 4-plex we converted to a hotel on one lot, and then our office is on the corner and then a house behind that. So 3 buildings, 2 lots.
Okay.
And it's a covered land play, so that you got a good price on it. We have good rates, and eventually we can tear those down and build a 100-foot tall structure.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big
100
component.
feet tall, that's
Yeah.
huge.
And so now listen to the time frames. So we hired a hiring coach in 2016. We moved into our office in 2017. In the market, where was the market going in 2017, 2018, and 2019? That's the back end of it, right? We were involved in that huge first run.
And 2017 was like the first year where we started seeing crazy bidding wars in Portland. I feel like.
Yeah, but it slowed down in 18 and 19.
Was it slower in 18?
Yeah.
19?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so
I
there's
remember
this
it.
time, 14, 15, 16 were really that
Where-
period of time.
Yeah.
17 was good, first half of 18, and then like the back half of 18 to the back half of 19 was just flat.
Right. Okay.
And then November of 19, it flipped before COVID. And so from our baseline, this is way overpriced. We can't cash flow.
Right.
Plus, we went from 0 units to like 70 in a quick period of time.
Plus, like complicated stuff. Too.
Yeah, and so your focus is on repositioning your portfolio. Then you look up, you're like, oh wow, we have some equity, we have a little bit of cash flow. Now let's invest on the business side. And we just didn't have the right vision. We didn't have the right leadership structure. It didn't make sense. We put a lot of money into the service side, and then now 2020, the events company, so COVID messed up all the business. A lot of the business model that we generated was now tough because of COVID, and then COVID just changes psychology in general,
Yeah.
which then changed kind of psychology at the business owner leadership level. And so when I say prepared, absolutely. A lot of equity, could have refinanced everything, could have got all of our cash back out, could have locked in really good debt for 10 years. We didn't need to.
Yeah.
And none of those properties are in a bad spot now because our debt was good going in, but we didn't maximize an opportunity.
Didn't completely get the maximum efficiency out of it.
Yeah. And so that's where having an awareness and alignment of, okay, well, what you're doing is not the same as the market. And the market may influence what you're doing. And it really does. So, goal setting, I think there's times for goals and there's times not for goals. And a lot of that for me as a developer is, well, the market drives a lot of that. If we're talking absorption rate, how can I change my goals if I expected to be out in 10 months and I'm still in 14 months, right? So that affects your next level of goal planning sessions. And if we're in a market where what we thought was a 10-month project becomes a 14-month project, guess what? That means we're buying some really good stuff, right? Because that means conditions exist for the acquisition side. And so maybe your absorption rate isn't as good. Maybe you're not as profitable on the development side, but now you've raised more capital, you've acquired more assets, you've got more repositioning to do. And so 14 months later, maybe you wanted to make goals at 10 months, but now you're 14 months in and everything's different.
Yep.
Profitability is different, balance sheet's different, resources are different. And so I see it as these cycles that we go through. Our personality changes with each cycle. And so now your individual thought process changes. Your balance sheet's different. Your staffing's different. Your basis is different. So I bought my business partner out at the end of 23. So 24 was just, man, we got bad basis. We have to get out of that and get in good basis. And because absorption rate was longer, well, 25 became getting out of bad basis too. And so it took a lot longer to roll into good projects with now feeling liquidity and feeling liquid and then having that right mindset. But along the way, built out a balance sheet. And so now that I'm back out of the forest, so it's being in the forest working versus now a visionary, right? So integrator, trying to get involved, push things through. Now we're back out of the forest. You can be a visionary. You reassess the resources that you have across the board. and then we can goal plan again and make a new vision based on the resources we have and where we want to go.
Yeah, and so from that development perspective, like clearly you've done a lot of different things. What opportunities are you kind of like looking at based on the landscape of current law now that, you know, of course it's changed in Oregon and in Multnomah County? Like what projects are you most interested in versus maybe before?
And it's not even law driven. It's more to me.
Well, because I know you did like some cottage cluster stuff,
Yeah.
which is like new.
That type of law. I'm thinking landlord
sorry.
tenant law.
Oh, you can get to that too.
I mean more like code and just like.
I'm so the appraisal world, highest and best use, zoning code, that drives my mindset. And then being a developer early on, early on when I started flipping, it was buy a house on 2 lots, split off a lot, sell a lot.
Oh, from the beginning you were doing
land splits.
Splits.
So I learned as an appraiser, I was watching people. I knew who the most successful people were. And
I've
I knew
always
how
seen
they did
that's
it.
like the biggest return is like on a flip. Is like buy a corner lot and split into it used to be. Now it seems like you can do more, but
Well, and even back then, you're splitting off a whole lot, and then that lot you can now develop into different ways. And so there's 2 profit centers. There's a profit center in splitting the lot, the development side. There's a profit center in flipping the house, and there's a profit center in building it out. And so I'd seen the most successful people, and I knew the code trick, and it's just understanding legal lots of record versus new zoning code and how history lines up to current code.
right.
And so you know that intricacy, great. Well, I'm going to buy a house, split off the lot, sell it to a builder, flip the house, gain experience doing that, eventually started partnering with a builder on the build side once a year, and then created an actual partnership. So
Code's scary for a lot of folks. So like I mean, I have a friend that's kind of doing it on his own right now, and it's taken him forever on his first one. Talk to us about like how you learned the code. You know, did you have a mentor on that, or did you just kind of?
Well, one, it's a great way to fall asleep at night is by reading.
Yeah, I mean, like I've read through it. Obviously, it's rough.
ChatGPT is so much more helpful.
But you didn't have that when you started.
No, it's just getting an escrow and doing due diligence. That's the only way to do it. And then you go down to the city, you sign up for the
so
meeting.
like making yourself putting a fire under your ass and making yourself do it, right?
Yeah, and you know, early on, now you can do it online, but you can do it in the city of Portland, 15-minute online meeting with every department. So when we didn't have online, I would go down there and I'd carve out 2 hours, go down to the city, and I go meet with someone in every department. They bring out their big, huge book, and then we contextually talk about this deal. And then data mining, right? So that's a data mining process.
Yeah.
Well, this is how the code worked on that one, and this one's similar, so can the code work here?
Right.
Or, well, that lot was different in this way, and so then that's why the code works out this way. And so now you start learning context.
Yeah.
Right? So you get taught in a vacuum, which does nothing.
Yep.
But now you start applying the vacuum, you learn context.
Yeah, that's super great advice. Okay, so you early on started by splitting lots, and then now what has that evolved into?
Yeah, so the middle housing is what we do now. We do a lot of cottages, ADUs, 2 ADUs. We've done a lot of fourplexes. That came out of market conditions as much as it did housing, right? And so where did that housing code came from? It came out of affordability. And so for us, I have just a heart for affordability. More background, when we were first acquiring stuff, I would negotiate the purchase. I'd figure out the financing. I know the economics of the deal, but I also went to the tenants and had to negotiate new rent with the tenants, right? Pre-rent control. You know, my stories are like $800 rent, market's $1,600, and so now you're going into a tenant's living room and saying, here's the reality: is when rent goes up 15% every year for 5 or 6 years, you have sticker shock, and most people don't pay attention to that.
Right.
You see the headlines, but who actually quantifies year after year after year what 15% rent increases?
Yeah.
They don't.
Massive.
Yeah. Until their landlord comes to them and says, hey, I'm going to sell, they have no clue of the context. And so I was caught in these living rooms where tenants are like, no way market rent's $1,600. You're lying to me. I'm like, hey, just go look. Let's have a conversation. They come back, wow, I think it's actually $1,700. You know. And so then you just like, well, what can you afford, and how long can you afford it? And you create a plan. Well, can you afford $1,200 this year? Can we go to $1,300 next year?
That's such an interesting way of framing that conversation, because I feel like you don't hear people frame it that way.
I mean, what else do you do? What do you say? You're gonna take
that seems
this?
like a logical way to do it, but most people don't. I mean, most people
Most
are
people
like,
don't ask questions.
Well, they say, okay, the rule is this, so that's what everyone's going to do. They're going to do the max.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is the first thing you need to understand about real estate is when someone says, well, usually you discount everything they say, right? Because you can do whatever you want. Sure, there's laws, but the reality is you can do whatever you want to agree to. That's a much more difficult now with rent control, but, and again, go back to the ego of the industry. People just want to tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
How often do people just ask questions? And so a quote I learned in 2019, the powerful question changes the future before the answer appears, right? Okay, so I could be in that living room saying, well, market rent $1,600, you're gonna pay $1,400, I don't care, that's what it is.
Right.
And they could move and they could hate you and you could have vacancy. Or you can ask, what can you afford?
Yeah.
And they can say, I can afford $1,200. And you're like, wow, that saves me a lot of headache and you're happy, let's do $1,200.
Yeah, not having to deal with turnover or things like that.
Yeah.
Waiting to get someone to occupy it.
But that's not what we're taught.
Yeah.
We're taught to underwrite it to these standards to get this return. But I'm sorry, that $2,400 that year doesn't change my life at all. It significantly changes that tenant's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but are we in it for the $2,400 this year, or are we in it for the $200,000 we make a couple years? And so if you keep the goal, your focus on, well, what am I trying to accomplish? Does this drop in the bucket actually fill the bucket?
Right.
Or do I need to focus on the bucket and just make sure the bucket doesn't tip over?
Right. Make sure there's not a terrible leak in it.
Yeah.
Make sure the bucket's not self-sabotaging it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and so that was some projects we had the financing where I could go in and negotiate those things. Some of them it was, well, we just need to maximize everything. Then we made mistakes of empty buildings and do all these renovations, and that was a huge waste.
Yeah.
So you go to maximization when it's like, okay, great, you have all this equity, but you're not using it. So you created it, but you're not realizing it.
Yeah.
So is it worth anything if you're not realizing it?
Mm.
So my philosophy has changed significantly just based on the positions I've been in, the context I've gained.
Mm. So going back to middle housing and affordability now, like what's the typical ideal project for you if someone's looking at, I have this single family lot, it's, maybe 10,000 square feet and I want to do something with it.
Yeah. The ideal project is anything and get the land for free. But no, the reality is what I'm finding is making the most sense. Because again, it's more of, I measure by bandwidth. So I don't want to do the projects too small.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want to do them because it needs to make sense for the use of bandwidth, but you don't want them too big because you don't want them to suck out your bandwidth.
Right.
And also, what are you delivering to the market?
Mm-hmm.
What we're finding is about half an acre is anywhere from like 15 to 22,000 square feet.
Okay.
And then we're putting anywhere from between like 7 to 11 cottages.
Mm.
We're getting around 2,000, 1,800 square foot of land per unit.
Okay.
We want to build all of them in a detached structure.
Uh-huh.
And so in all
Can
this,
you talk a little bit about cottages too? Because I think this word is we understand it, but it's like a new word for a lot of folks.
Let's go back to affordability. So when you look at the economics of building something, you just can't build it for cheaper. It just is what it is.
Right.
And so the only way to deliver a new unit that is more affordable, you have two options. One, you go get government money, some type of tax subsidy.
Yep.
You bang your head against the wall to figure it out, and then now you're forced to then manage it every year at this level of affordability. Yep. Or you build a different housing style.
Right.
You build it smaller. Mm-hmm. So like our cost per square, we sell these, like $500,000 for 800 square feet. So $600 a square foot. Mm. Really expensive.
Right.
But it's $500,000 for
Right.
new construction with
Right,
a yard and no common wall.
Okay.
Right. So it's a different unit type. So the gross cost to the end user makes sense on a month-to-month basis.
And it's like a detached condo situation?
Correct. Yeah. So we're doing either condos or middle housing land division. But think of the thought process of our future generations. And so like I developed this stuff. So my comment threads on social media are pretty effed up, right? Because the NIMBYs, not my backyard, hate it. So what's the question? Should we be developing, because if you're developing cottage clusters next to a single family home, because the code allows you to do that on a single family lot, well now
that's everywhere in Oregon.
Everywhere in Oregon.
Yep.
So now, to some extent, you're infringing on that previous owner. Because instead of having one owner next door, now they have 4, right? But my question is, should we be keeping the texture of the neighborhood for the people that have been living there for decades who are going to be dead relatively soon? Or should we be developing our footprint for the generations that are going to be living in them? And the reality is the generations behind us have a completely different mindset than the generations before us. And this is a really hard time in our generations where our future the gap between our kids and our grandparents is the widest gap between grandkids and grandparents ever because of what technology has done. And you throw in COVID, and you throw in the money printing, and you throw in their base cost to survive. And so that means we need to design a different world for them. And so if you think of that now, and you have a heart for affordability, and you love architecture, and you love to build, it just makes sense. And so then that's just kind of driven us. We bought 15 projects between 2021 and March 2022. The last one so we closed one in December 21 just because I committed to a seller, should have terminated the transaction, didn't. And we were profitable, but it just wasn't worth, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. We bought one in March because it was a product match. We knew we could get it done quickly, and we needed to get profitability because by that time we knew we were in a bad basis. So $25 million pipeline, and we were able to exit kind of all that. And then now gaining all that experience for phase two, which is phase two is a completely different underwriting model. So now that we know the actual logistics of it and the specifics, and you've seen how other developers, what they've developed. So everyone developed similar units. Ours were the coolest by far. We paid the highest, like we're the only person in town, not the only, but only a few of us are using this one architect. If you Google ADU, it's our plan that comes up in different city, right? So we learned what should we build. We learned who the buyers are. Where should you build them? So you can build 4 units on any 5,000 square foot lot. You shouldn't build 4 units on every 5,000, right? So knowing where to build it and why, what's the density mix, what do you need to be close to? And so now we changed our model to, well, we want a little bit more scale. We'll do the smaller scales in the right locations with the right basis, but we understand that end buyer demographic. And so now and instead of underwriting it from a build for sale lens, we're underwriting it from a build to rent lens.
So now
our
building
basis,
a portfolio now.
And market conditions allow that, right? So in 21 and 20, you just didn't have, there's so much competition, and no one knew what the back end looked like. That, and effective purchasing power, there's a lot of money. And so now a lot of those developers left, those sellers don't have options, and so the ones that are buying are the ones that know. And so now they have a different lens. Basis is different, and so we're in this cool period of time where you can actually get some pretty good basis on dirt, and then go to vertical. And then the city of Portland, because there's such a shortage of housing permits right now, and they've been down this road, they can see that we're going to have a shortage of housing. They took off some of our soft costs.
And so, like, just for a rough idea, what is like a typical one of these cottages like in terms of average cost to build, average sale, and our average rent? Like, just looking at it from
let's say no average.
Let's say you're building like 10 at a, let's say you're building 10 at a time.
There's no free market in the city, right? So that's, you take that out of it. So if you just say there's no subsidy involved, your average costs are going to be 200 to, I think our high, we've had an ADU that costs like 300 grand. Because there's a lot of site improvements. But and those were smaller units, higher design. Right now what we're building is about $185 per square foot for the hard cost. That's not land. That's not your architect fees.
Sub 2 is still pretty good.
So sub 200 is about your hard cost. Now if you can get your dirt for like 10 or 20 grand per unit, which that sounds unreasonable, because it is unreasonable. So that's where you have to have an acquisition strategy and a development strategy.
And that's where the middle housing works well too, because you can put more units on smaller amount, right?
And we're using, and the other thing is, well, I don't like demolition either. I love old architecture, and so we specifically want a half an acre with a house and enough space we can build around the house.
So it's like one house with like maybe 8 to 10 going on.
So like example, if I could say, well, I can buy, so I'm doing one right now, we paid $590 for it. Well, the house on just its own portion of the lot can be worth $550 to $600, and I could build 6 units in the back. I think our total, we lost about 100 grand into the dirt. So they're 15 grand a unit, and then we build them for $250 and they're worth $400. or more, depending on what we build, where we build it, and to the density level. But you know,
these are like 800 square feet, 2 stories.
so we've changed.
Okay.
Originally, and code came out in 2 phases. So Oregon set national precedent saying you local jurisdictions have to create code by 2021. If you don't, you have to adopt our code.
Or just go by ours.
Yeah, Portland had been working on their code since 2013. So Portland had their code essentially created where none of the other jurisdictions didn't. And so we were Portland's way ahead of the game. Portland launched in 2 phases. Phase one of 2021 was you can do a house with 2 ADUs instead of a house with 1 ADU.
Yep.
You could do a duplex with 1 ADU. You could do a triplex or a fourplex. And then in 22, they launched the Cottage cluster. And so that first phase was mostly driven by ADUs, and ADUs had an 800 square foot size cap.
Right.
Everyone designed 800 square feet, and that leaves 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. That's it.
Right.
When the Cottage cluster came out, and now it's a floor area ratio. So how much land determines how much square footage you can build.
So it's a footprint, so you could do 2 stories or whatever.
Exactly.
And have more square footage.
Yep. And then the market's flooded with 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath units.
Yep.
And so now we redesigned. So now our average is, we've got 6 different floor plans now. They're all 3 bedrooms and either 2 baths or 2.5s. And then we have one floor plan that's 3 stories, 1,495 square feet.
Oh, wow.
It's 4 bedrooms, 2.5
So
baths.
this is like a this is like a family.
No,
this is
these
like
are
a
houses.
This is like a townhouse.
Yeah. So what's different is they're not going to have parking if they're in Portland because you can't physically build the parking.
Yep.
Your yard is more like a 5-foot setback if you can have a big lot. So yards are sometimes in the front, sometimes they're in the side.
Yeah.
So you don't have the yard space.
Sure.
But you don't have a common wall.
Do these come with garage? You said no parking at all.
No parking. Yeah,
Oh,
because each jurisdiction has a different real world population demand.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought some of them require. So they don't require parking for cottage clusters.
So Portland, so they all have their code. So for example, in Portland, you cannot have a parking space between a cottage and the road. Okay, so not in front of.
Okay.
But in Milwaukee, so Milwaukee's a suburb. Most of the suburbs have this language, which is you cannot have a cottage forward of. Or you can't have parking forward of a cottage. So you can have parking in front of a cottage, but you have to have another cottage as close to the front of the lot line as your parking.
Oh, weird.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like I have this Milwaukee project where, well, if they allow us to put cottages behind the parking, well, we can add a cottage behind our parking lot. But then we went in and they said, well, no, the word's forward of. And so they actually said, well, you need to add a unit to this side of the lot within 10 feet of the 10-foot setback, so within 10 feet of the road, so your parking lot can start at 10 feet. Otherwise, you got to bring your parking back and you lose a spot. So if you want that spot, you got to build another unit. And then, but because Milwaukee is a suburb, they have bigger lots. They have more land. They don't have as much transportation.
Right.
They need to have a code that allows parking. Portland's different.
Right.
Portland's forced to take on more density. They have standard lot sizes. They're not as big. So they created their code to keep you from doing parking.
That makes sense.
'Cause
And they
it
got
meets
plenty
their
of
goals.
public transit.
Yeah. And here's an example where I've got a lot. So it's a flag lot and a house. I paid $525. The flag lot was 20 feet wide. The pole was 20 feet wide and goes to a big lot. But that's too small to do a cottage cluster. So I made the flag pole 36 feet wide so I could do a cottage cluster. And basis on the size, I can do 8 in the back and then 2 in the flag pole and have 10 units. But what I want to do is remove one of the 2 in the flagpole and put a parking lot in between that front unit and the 8 cottages in the back. But in order to do that, my parking lot would come 2 feet in front of one of the units in the back.
And they don't really allow for variance on that.
There's an adjustment. So now you look at, well, but then you also have to have a landscaping buffer and a setback. And so in order to do that, we would have to go in for 3 adjustments. And the planners are like, we're just not going to approve it.
Right.
So you can spend the 20 grand asking for it, but we're not going to approve it.
Yeah.
So that's where now you understand the different locations have different demands and you have to develop different product,
Right.
know your audience.
So yeah, thinking that you could just easily transport this model to other cities is a little bit.
It's false.
easy.
It's
It's about, most real estate is fallacy. I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, oh, I'm in this group and everyone told me, like 5 different people told me they need to talk to you. And we're talking, and then finally I asked, what's the price? And I'm like, 1.5. I'm like, well, what? You're wasting my time. This is not, you're new, I get it, you're trying to wholesale, you flip some houses. Even if you could figure out how to raise capital around this, you're gonna lose everyone's money. So just stop the conversation, learn some stuff, but don't, people, seller financing is usually for the seller, not the buyer.
Well, we don't want to keep too much of your time, but if someone, you do so much, so I don't even know.
I think for most interesting would be like if someone, wants to do wants to get into developing. Maybe they've been in real estate for a while, or maybe they have a bigger lot that they think, saw these new middle housing rules. How can I figure out, without spending a ton of money, like whether or not I can?
Don't hire an architect to do a feasibility study. Right. So you don't know what you want to do. You want to hire a feasibility study is essentially it. Architects will charge you money, but they never put their money into the deal. So you don't want to trust an architect, right? You align yourself with another developer. Is really what you need to do. Is you need to align yourself with the developer.
So start with a partner you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people love to get in. It's an ego play. New construction is an ego play. Understand this: until it's actually built, you don't even not have value. You have negative value.
Yeah.
And if you can't execute it and get it built, you've lost money. And so it doesn't matter. You are at risk until you have your occupancy certificate. And why do that when you can go buy a building with an occupancy certificate? It doesn't take the permitting process. It doesn't take the timeline process. Because it's built, it's easier to get financing on it. Right? There's so many easier ways to go with an existing building than new construction. But like what you said, if they already have experience, if they have a portfolio, if they have a big lot, and that's the great way, is just go land bank, get some covered land plays, let that land mature for a few years, you pay your principal down, value goes up, market changes. Now you have something that you bought based on fundamental rental value, fundamentals. Now it has the equity that justifies developing it. Now you can go align yourself with the developer to then develop it. And give some of the trade some risk for some profit.
There you go. I like that.
And if people are looking to get a hold of you, find you, learn more about Rarebird, how can they find you?
My handles are Rarebird_Mike.
Okay.
And we got some websites out there, but like 2 of them don't work right now.
Oh, perfect.
and last thing, what, since you've got such a handle on the development and what's going on in Portland, what are you thinking in the next 5 years? Where do you think our code is headed? Now that this middle housing bill seems to be successful, do you think that's going to continue to expand, or just curious what your forecast on that?
No, it won't continue to expand. I think there's too much pushback, and I don't think it needs to. I think we'll tweak the code for better. So those parking issues we're talking about, we'll fix that. Another stupid issue is you have to have a minimum 5,000 square foot lot to do cottages, but you can do them on three cottages on 3,000 if you do it right. So
why not be able to build 2 condos on a small
So the
lot?
city says, well, you can build 3 attached units, but you can't build 3 detached units. Well, what would you rather have? What would the market really want? And so the code can get cleaned up, and it will get cleaned up. What the biggest drawback to this has been is it's an affordability play, and interest rates just undercut you. And so interest rates and affordability coming back into a little bit better alignment helps with the code portion of it. But more it's technology. Technology around cars is going to change everything. If we don't get more technology around cars, I think you need to start looking at the larger apartment complexes and start requiring different levels of parking, because your cottages you're adding density without parking at the single family zoning lot level, but then you don't require parking at the bigger apartments.
Ours, we just did a 41 unit that didn't require parking, and I was shocked. I mean, we're putting in parking, but I was shocked. Crazy.
What are they gonna do? We're not the best, what's the commuter city? Not commuter, but public transit city. So.
Well, so Salem not but Portland is kind of a nation leader. And actually, one of the so Division Street, it was Wall Street Journal's top street in the nation in like 2016. That got funded by a local developer who convinced bankers out of San Francisco to fly to Portland and walk across the Hawthorne Bridge at 7 a.m. so they could see thousands of bikes crossing the
I
river.
mean, it's the Max line is pretty good now
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like,
So Portland's there, Salem's not, and I'd actually say I don't know that I do parking in your project just because of where it's located. Where I see that between Salem and Kaiser, that is prime redevelopment, there won't be cars. And if I was actually thinking Salem, if Salem was on the timelines of Portland, that's prime for a streetcar. Maybe they don't have the width, maybe there'd be some eminent domain.
That would be so cool if they did that.
Right? And you have that huge waterfront, the Pruitt project. So yeah, but at the same time, you want to build amenities that are going to draw people to your.
Yeah.
So on that thought is, I would love to see them require parking, require underground parking for the big apartment complexes. Find a way to subsidize that to help offset the cost.
Yeah, because it's so much more expensive, right?
Because what you're saying is people are going to hate it because you're giving money to developers, but what you're saying is we're giving parking to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's all you're
It's
saying.
improving everybody's
Exactly,
life. Yeah.
correct. But that's not how because people think in the quantitative in vacuums rather than qualitative because everything bleeds together.
And visually, it's so much better when things are underground. Like when the cars are
Absolutely,
underground.
yeah. And your car is not hot when you go get it. Get in it. And I can keep my dog in the car. Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much, Mike.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.